Welcome to Camp Confidential, Beyond the Bars. I'm Katrina McLaren, and with my co-host Cheryl Womack, author, entrepreneur and philanthropist, we tell it like it is. In Season 1, we take you inside the walls of the Women's Federal Prison Camp. From pre-sentencing to navigating daily life behind bars, we offer practical advice, survival strategies and insights that no one tells you before you go in. No sugarcoating, no cliches. This podcast is for information and entertainment purposes only. Be sure to do your own research and consult a professional. So today's episode is entitled Unsafe Sanctuary and is based off the book How to Go to Camp, Surviving in a Women's Federal Prison by Cheryl Womack, available now on Amazon. This episode is going to walk you through where you will live when you first arrive at camp, and your new home may not always feel safe. Cheryl, let's talk about the bus stop. That's where you started off, and why is it called that?
Well, the bus stop is just an entry place. Some people get a larger room with a dorm of bunk beds that might all be in a row before you get a assigned space in an alley. They don't quite know where they're going to put you and who they're going to put you with. And the alleys may be full. They may not have space for you. So new people go into what's called a bus stop. It's like a very small bedroom with 5 bunk beds in it, 5 middle bunk beds and 10 lockers. Some are stacked on each other. Some are side by side, all metal. All the walls in the camp are cylinder block. And to me, what was disturbing about that is one of my bunkies there told me that she had those in her house when she was growing up, in her apartment when she was growing up, because she lived in government housing. And I just thought, oh my God, that's what you grew up with as a child. It was sad. It was hard. Anyway, so she was familiar with the finish or the look. There's nothing really on the walls. We did have a window looking out, no bars. And then you have a very heavy door that can make it more quiet than really most places. You have a foyer where you come through. There's a big foyer in between all the alleys, and that's where you can get your hot water and your cold water and, group and get ready to go out for meals or what have you. And then you come into alleys. And so these bus stops are the beginning of each alley. So they're sort of side by side for a A and a B and a C and a D. You come into the bus stop and you get assigned your spot. You get your bed made. I think the biggest thing just for physical danger is that, again, if you have a top bunk bed, I don't care if you have a bottom bunk bed. If you fall in that room, you're going to hurt yourself, and you're going to hurt yourself badly. That was nerve-wracking. Early on when I was in the bus stop, one of the girls that came in shortly after me was in the bus stop next to me. And when we were out for a count, she was so emotionally worked up that she finally passed out during count and went to the ground. And that's horrifying anyway, to watch somebody pass out during the count when I don't know what they're going to do to her. And the guards just walked over her and left her on the ground, which was horrifying to me because there was nobody who was going to give her any medical supervision or care for her. So that sort of set a tone for me very early on, because that was in the very first few days that you're going to have to look out for yourself and make sure that you're okay.
Well, it's still going to make you feel safe when you watch a guard walk over someone basically unconscious on the ground in front of you.
It is just a physically unsafe place.
So opposite the bus stop too, I wasn't sure whether you had a bathroom or a toilet that was inside, like it. I've seen too many movies where you see it inside the room. Tell me what's around the bus stop. What is there?
Straight across from the bus stop and the door is 3 or 4 old-fashioned payphones like you would find on the streets, and chairs or benches. Not for all of them, but for some of them. I think there was a bench for 3 of them, and the 4th one didn't have a bench. You could stand at it. And so there was that. And then there was a really wide door opening with 50-gallon giant trash cans right in the entryway that were constantly full of the most disgusting trash, which was only topped by the disgusting room you walked into as you went into the bathroom. So as you walked in immediately to the right, you had four bathroom stalls. So you had private stalls. And if you walked in further and didn't go in to take a shower, you had 4 bathroom stalls to go to the bathroom. And then you had a long vanity and mirror that extended the entire length of the wall, with bins at the end of it that looked like heaps of garbage getting ready to be thrown out. Those were your blow dryers and your curling irons. And occasionally you'd find a flat iron, but usually somebody to hide it so that only special people could get their hands. Like, you're always going around going, who's got the flat iron? Once you finally know somebody who's got a flat iron, if you could get one. But the stuff was pretty used, even though they just buy it from Walmart and bring it in from time to time. They didn't do it very often. So you also have to worry about where you're going to short circuit something out in there, because again, the walls and the floors are filled with mold and filth. I mean, even when they mop them, they're just mopping dirt. It's just not a clean place. It's not just not a clean place. It's a filthy place.
So tell me, because I know that you wear, like, you buy flip-flop shower shoes because no one wants to get a fungal infection. But the cubicle, so do you have any privacy when you're showering or able to use the bathroom? For
Yes.
me, that would be one of the scariest things about having to, go to prison, in effect.
It made me very nervous about publicly going to the bathroom, and I think you hear a lot of people comment about that in city and state and county where they do have a bathroom that they have to publicly share. The bathroom stalls were like in school, in grade school and high school. You just go into them and push your door open and you're in one stall or another. Of course, another thing about that is, and if you're going to the bathroom, you learn something which I'd never heard of, and I guess men know about, called a courtesy flush. Because if you're going in there for a while, and the room can reek depending upon what's going on. And if you've been in there for a while, you learn just along the way, give it a flush so that it doesn't just sit there and smell the place up to high heaven. Because people are putting on their makeup, getting dressed, doing their hair, blow drying their hair. That's where you get dressed.
Well, I
So
suppose
it's
it's common courtesy, isn't it? Because you're sharing the space with a lot of different people and a lot of
40
different personalities.
45 women plus the bus stop, so about 55 people per bathroom. Yes, it's a lot. It's a
And
very, very busy place.
And you were saying, because we're talking about how you're made to feel it's your new home, it's your sanctuary, but you don't necessarily feel safe in it. So after the 10 o'clock count, I could imagine that if the guards, they don't come back around and recheck every few hours, you're sort of left alone pretty much to your own devices. So these can also be dangerous spaces.
Right. You've got to, I mean, common sense would tell you that if you're supposed to be in bed and going to sleep by 10 o'clock, if you get up and you go out into the common area or even into the bathroom to go to the bathroom and other people are out, they're not rule followers particularly. They're not necessarily safe people. They could be people, that are, a couple of them are getting together. That's where the most likely possibility of a rape or being lock in a sock, being beat up or something like that could happen. Some girls would go and watch TV, and depending upon, other than one guard that we had pretty routinely in the evenings, the rest of the guards didn't. You didn't have any guards come down until 5 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning when they went through to do flashlights and do accounts. So you didn't see guards all night. You were basically on your own. So there are just people there that you have people there who are mental. I mean, they don't have their wits about them. You have people coming off drugs. They get very agitated. You have people there who are sick and unhealthy. So you have to worry about what happens if they pass out or they go into a coma, or they're diabetics and they have a diabetic attack. I mean, all of those kinds of things can happen. And it wasn't uncommon for us to go into the bus stop with a new person who's coming off drugs, and they just had to detox right there amongst us. They don't give you anything for it. I had one gal that I brought in as a big sister, and she was in our bus stop, and she was a frail little thing, though she was a little bit older, and she had alcohol poisoning bad. It took her a couple weeks to be able to just walk around by herself. She couldn't speak a lick of English. And I'm in there sort of yelling at medical, going, who's going to watch out for her? And what do we do? What happens if after 10 o'clock at night when there's no medical on site? And they said, well, it's a good thing there's 9 other people in there besides you, isn't it? It's like, what? I mean, you just knew. You weren't going to be cared for. It's not safe. There was another woman who was in my alley who had played softball, and when they used to have some organized teams and things going on, and she'd been in for 5 or 6 years. Well, while she played softball, she slid into base, or I can't remember exactly what she did, but she injured her hip and her pelvic pretty bad. And she knew she did, but they wouldn't send her away. They just wouldn't send her to get it checked. And every time they kept treating her for one part or the other, they didn't treat her for the whole thing. So her pelvic bone ended up being cracked, and she ended up having to have major surgery. This girl, the whole time I was there, she barely got out of a wheelchair. And then toward the very end, she was in crutches, but she'd been in a wheelchair for a couple of years. I mean, healing. And the other thing that's very scary, if you have medical problems, you'll go on what's called a medical hold. And that means you can't get out. You have to be medically healthy to be released. So if you're getting treated for something and it's time to get out, you're not getting out. And that was horrifying to me. Horrifying.
Well, that's scary. That's a really scary prospect. So not only do you have to obviously be very aware about added time, now you've got, if something medically goes wrong, you can still be forced to stay there.
Correct. And she probably did an extra year's time. She literally had her family suing the prison, suing the Bureau of Prisons. And she felt like she's been retaliated against. And I couldn't answer to that one way or the other, but she did a year's more time because she couldn't get released.
If something happens to you dentally, it could take up to 6 months, but they'll just pull your teeth.
If you were one of the many in there who'd been on drugs, and they could tell because you'd already had probably bone loss, and they could just tell by the condition of, treated you differently if you were a regular inmate versus an inmate on drugs. You just got less care. You didn't get examined. I mean, you got your regular exams like you're supposed to get for teeth and stuff, but if you had teeth go bad, I'd have people who were my bunkies go in and go, I don't want to go in because when I go in and I'm having a toothache, they're just going to pull my tooth. Until they got enough of them pulled, they'd have to get dentures. And then the other hard part is because you are a person in there on drugs, they just took their dear sweet time ordering your dentures and or eyeglasses if you needed eyeglasses. And then like one gal, when I was getting out, had to stay an extra, I want to say 30 or 60 days to get her dentures because she wasn't going to be able to afford dentures when she got out. And when she finally got hers, and she'd waited almost a year to get them, and when she finally got hers, they didn't fit well. They did not fit. She could hardly eat or wear them. So she had to stick around, I think, another 30, 60 days to get them fixed and be appropriate so that she could get out.
Likelihood of getting employment is not going to be great either if you haven't got teeth. And I don't mean that to be rude in any way, shape, or form, but there is a physical appearance that you can be judged upon sometimes, which is unfortunate, but it's true. Thinking about, how the prison out of hours is such, it's not like you have access to phones and computers either, do you? Because are they cut off at certain
Yeah.
times, or how does that work?
Right. Once the phones get cut off at 9 o'clock, well, no, from 9 to 10 in the evenings, there's a mad dash and there's lines for phones and computers because that's your last hour. But at 10 o'clock, the whole system shuts off. And then it doesn't really start again until I want to say 6 in the morning, maybe 5:30, 6 in the morning. And so in between those hours, and actually during the day when you're supposed to be working, like they turn the phones on in the morning, and then by 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, the phones go back off. And then they come on for a couple hours over lunch, and then they come back on and go off, and they come back on the evening. So when you're supposed to be working or be somewhere, you cannot just go grab and use phones. They go off and on depending upon what's going on around there. So it just, I mean, if you're in lockdown, for example, they may decide to cut the phones at the same time too. And one of the things that happens when we were talking about shots is you can get a shot. One of the things you can lose is phone time.
And I would have thought phone privileges are, very valuable to most inmates as their main line of communication out with the outside world and their family, their loved ones. So
Absolutely.
did you ever feel unsafe physically when you were there as from, out of hours from the other female prisoners? Because it's not just guards that I think, we all hear the stories about, prison rapes and so forth, but women can be just as violent.
Women are very violent. And I think we briefly touched on it, but when a woman is getting out and she's got a girlfriend, the girlfriend who remains behind starts looking for someone else. And those are some of the biggest fights. And they're nasty cat fights when they happen. They can break out in the TV room. People fight over the TV room. There's people go in there and they just mark their seats that they sit in. And you could be in there and the seat's empty because they don't come till 9 o'clock every night to watch a certain show, or 8 o'clock every night and watch the last two shows, but they're not there the rest of the evening. And if you're sitting in their chair, they just come stand over you larger than life. And then interestingly enough, the TV rooms are broken out by race. There's the black TV room and there's the other TV room. And why that's that way, I don't know. But if you go into the black TV room and you're not of color, you get some looks. Because I'm Hispanic, but I got looks like, why are you here? And you're talking, it's like, you said something, it's attitude. So that I found interesting and intimidating. It scared me. It's like, you felt like they were trying to intimidate you out of the room. Don't come in here. Don't come around here. But they were just as intimidating in the other side where they just did not want you to have their seats, and this is where they sit all the time. And that's just the way it is.
So do you think a lot of behavior though that you witnessed while you were there, because you have told me about several things that have occurred and that you witnessed, do you think a lot of that is people putting on a front or a bravado or looking to shock you from their behavior? You've told me about gay for the stay.
Right. No, I don't think they're putting it on. So when you're in camp or prison, you begin to develop routines. There's very little you have control over. And at any moment, whatever you think you have control over, you can lose by the whim of a guard or what may happen under those circumstances. To get through your day, a lot of people just create their routines. And they get very established routines. They get up at this time, they do this at this time. And if something happens to put off that routine, they can become very unsettled. And again, they can be mean. In the bus stop beside me, a gal didn't want to see me in the bus stop because I wasn't supposed to be in that bus stop. I was in the other one, but I was coming to see friends to go eat with. I learned later, really, you're not supposed to go into the other bus stops, but I'd go in, say, hey, are we ready to go eat? And, I got thumped. A couple times. You can get a fight going pretty easily because people, you maybe just had a fight with somebody on the phone. You maybe just got written up, from a counselor. You maybe had a bad visit with a visitor. You maybe didn't get a visitor you thought you were getting. So many things can go wrong, and they're much more unsettling because you're just emotionally trying to stabilize yourself, I think, every day. There's nothing normal about being in prison. There's just nothing normal about it. And so you're just sitting there trying to figure out how to make things as routine as they can be. And for me, it was how many different things could I do? I like to be over busy. So I would get over busy and do things, but that meant I didn't really have a specific routine in my day for the most part, even as town driver. I mean, sometimes I'd have to be up at 4 o'clock in the morning to take somebody to the bus stop, not the bus stop inside, but the bus stop to go home or to their next location. And other times I might not get in until 7 o'clock at night if I'm bringing them home from, outpatient surgery. So I was used to that, not having those routines. But for other people, that would be problematic because they eat with the same people, they do certain things, they watch certain shows together. I think the hardest thing is after you've been in and you've gotten the security of a routine, the hardest thing when you come out even is the fear of the unknown of what's the routine now. So as afraid as everything can make you going into prison, once you establish a routine, it can make you even more afraid when you're coming out.
Cheryl, if you had some type of medical issue, you've already spoken about the woman that collapsed in front of you and the guards didn't sort of do anything about that, but there's no obligation for the guards to inform your family should something arise while you're in prison. Say you're taken to hospital offsite. What would you recommend that an inmate does in that situation?
Right. I think one of the things I recommend in the book early on is to take your time, but make friends with someone that you can build some sort of rapport and trust with that has a good, stable contact on the outside. Because what happens is when I watch someone taken away, if they were a friend, then I could send an email to my husband, and I would have their phone number. And like one of my bunkies, even down the alleyway, we exchanged phone numbers and agreed that if anything happened to us, if we were taken away for being in trouble or for a medical problem, we would have our spouses reach the other spouse and let them know why we were taken away. Because again, they can pick you up for a furlough or they're going to take you through Oklahoma and you're going to be there for a few days before they figure out where you go next. And you could disappear for a couple of weeks.
So it's not just medical. I mean, if you get into trouble, you could be taken away and your family not notified. There's numerous reasons that you can be made to disappear. If you're a witness, I suppose, if you're called.
Right. Right. If you're a witness and there are several people, that are on the same case, again, you can be pulled in as a witness and you have to be brought in there however you're brought in, whether they're flying you in, busing you in, or whatever. And you may never be a witness against them, but the whole time that you're there, aren't in contact with anybody to tell anybody where you are. I mean, it's a scary. I think the hardest part for me was that I had a gal who I brought home from having a real serious surgery, and I do think that our guard, who's pretty nice, the night when Miss Gross, who came often, but not often enough, called the family after the gal was going to stay in because she had a really serious surgery, and she had to stay in the hospital for about a week having the surgery, and then she had to wear a coloscopy bag when she came out and she was in a wheelchair. Now, here's the other part that I think is medically crazy to me and dangerous. When you're in those bags or you're in a wheelchair, you have to will yourself to medical across the campus, whether it's 5 degrees below zero. So just before they do a 10 o'clock count, they call medical like at 15 minutes before 10, maybe 9:30 if you're lucky. And you've got to get up there, let them see you to, give you your do vitals and then bring yourself back before they do the count.
So a
Sometimes
nurse
somebody
is not wheeling you or coming to collect you, or another inmate's
no,
not charged with doing that. Right.
no,
Okay.
no. And I mean, you have to get permission to help wheel somebody there because otherwise you're breaking the rules after 9 coming out. And I mean, to me that so you've just come out of surgery. And I mean, we're talking the night of inpatient surgery or your first night back from having surgery, you're climbing out of those crappy beds and you're getting into your wheelchair and you're wheeling yourself over to medical. It is not a short wheel. I mean, it's not a short walk. So if you're in a wheelchair and it's up a little bit of a hill where ours is not bad, but a little bit of a hill, and then you've got to wheel yourself back. And in this particular gal's case, when she came to the visitor's room, the crazy guard we had at the time decided that she'd pat her down and literally broke the connection into her skin for her coloscopy bag because she had to pat her down. It's like she just came out of surgery and her family came to see her because they couldn't come see her in the hospital while she was there because she had to be, a guard had to be there and be with the place all the time and she had to stay in the hospital. So they came to see her when she got back out. She was hurt. I mean, it physically hurt her. And what if it caused infection or other problems? I mean,
Well,
you
I'm
just don't know
thinking
what's
no one
going to
needs to
happen.
be patted down that hard that your colostomy bag unattaches. So yeah,
Good point.
there's parts to the story where yeah, it just doesn't make sense to me as to it's just sort of basic human decency, I think, on how you treat other people.
Well,
Um,
I don't think it's okay. I don't think it's okay that they make you feel bad because you've been on meth and you've got health problems. So again, while we're talking about feminine hygiene is a problem and you need more of it because you've been unhealthy, you also don't get seen or taken as seriously because you're unhealthy, and they know you're unhealthy because you've been on drugs. All those things are very scary things. So it is good to go see your doctor and try to get in front of some of those things before you go there. It's good to stay healthy.
Well, let's talk about, I would have imagined that when you first sort of went into prison as well, let's talk about depression and mental health, because I would have thought that would have been a real issue. You've got a completely new environment. You're scared. You don't know what to expect. You couldn't find good information about the experience. How do you cope with that? Because I mean, I personally know you and I know you're quite resilient, but that's got to test even the strongest person.
It does testament. And another thing that my family and I did, or my family did what they thought they were doing for me, is they would have it seemed like the universe come and tell me goodbye the last week before I was home to go in. Well, every time you're telling somebody new goodbye, you're crying because you're telling them goodbye for a long time. And it reminds you of how afraid you are, reminds you you're leaving your own life. It's a horrible thing to do to people. It's a horrible thing to do. But I sucked it up and had the whole world come through and tell me goodbye. So you're mentally and emotionally exhausted when you go there anyway, and you are not in a good mental state of mind. And some of those people are not in a good state of mind anyway. They're coming off drugs. They're mentally not resilient. They might be unstable, period, anyway. They might have been in a county for 6 months before they got put in a federal prison waiting for their trial. So it's not uncommon to see people being very depressed. A lot of people will try to sleep a lot, and there's just so much sleeping you can do. I'm pretty fortunate that a lot of these things to this day, 5-6 years later, still bother me, but I snap out of them and get busy. I refuse. I mean, I have a motto that the best revenge in life is a good life. So it's like, I'm not going to be drugged down by this, but things bother you.
I think too, in your particular case, that you were quite resilient, but you were quite happy to get up out of bed, find yourself a job, and start to establish
Maybe not at
routine.
the time they wanted me to get out of bed. I mean, be
No,
up and dressed on the regular dorm side by 7 a.m. And I mean, I didn't have to be at work when I had a business till 9 and 9:30. So it was like, oh my God, you're killing me. But I mean, I'd be up working till 2 in the morning.
but you had a purpose, so you'd get up and created a purpose. So your way of coping with how you felt and being depressed was to soldier on and to get moving, and not everyone can do that, and some people will just stay in the bed and not move, and I'm sure you would have seen cases of that as well.
Right. And again, I had the funds to be able to buy food or negotiate to, have a treat, for movie night, different things like that. Some people, if you're a little bit odd, and there are people there that are a little bit odd, people don't befriend you and they'll have no problem making fun of you. So that can be difficult too.
It sounds like a high school horror story, to be honest, having to
It is.
do that
It
again.
I called it junior high on steroids. It's like Mean Girls. They're mean. They'll laugh and cackle and carry on it when you're coming down. And you could have done the nicest thing for them. And on one hand, it's their home, and they try to but a lot of them want it to be their home for their way. Well, you've got 45 different personalities in there. They each have a different way they're used to living. So it's a complicated environment to try to adjust to.
Explain for the listeners, if you will, the saying, "Don't pet the puppies."
So that happened to me right away. Again, there was a gal there who you can be anybody you want in prison, anybody you want. And it's very hard for somebody in there you can't go Google them and say, is that true? If you talk, you may have somebody who's going to hit you up for money all the time. They don't have anything and they figure out, well, you've got a little extra money. And so they're constantly, Biddy, I need 5 cents. Biddy, I need this. Can you have extra honey bunny? Biddy, can you front me this? Cause I owe somebody this, to pay my debt. And then you figure out after a while, they're always going to have a debt. They're always going to need something. They're a mooch. And so you really have to watch yourself and not befriend everybody that comes up to you. I mean, they tell you right from the beginning, if somebody comes and gives you something in the beginning, don't take it because you don't know what strings are attached to it. You do not know what strings are attached to that. And it could be sexual. It could be they want you to do things for them. They want you to buy them something and you don't know. And so you really have to think about what you're taking from anybody.
That's an interesting point, though, because you are in a privileged position when you went into camp. You could afford to, you knew you always had money on your books, so you could pay for things you wanted from commissary. And you could do little things to make your life a little bit easier, like laundry and, the burritos on a Friday night. There was elements to your prison life that certainly were easier than maybe for the average person. How do you navigate the ability of people understanding that you have money or that you might have influence in that way over them personally being able to threat you and or intimidate you? How do you find that line of, standing up for yourself enough, but not enough to be beaten, if that makes sense?
I mean, there's a fine line, because clearly I was told over and again I carried myself differently than most people in there. I just carried myself with more confidence. A lot of them have had to say, I'm sorry for what they did so many times that it's the first thing they say to you. I did the crime. I'm so sorry that I did it, because, you have to show remorse for your crime to get out of prison, blah, blah, blah. I didn't feel like I did my crime, so I wasn't very remorseful. And I would lecture people and go, how many times do you have to say you're sorry? When is it enough? But that was where they mentally were coming from. And I didn't come from there mentally. And so I clearly carried myself differently. And there was this one gal that came in, and she had real curly hair, and she was a cute little gal, but I think she was Hispanic, but she was a nationality and I couldn't tell what. And she came in with a group when she came in with the Big Sisters group. And just the way she looked and her eyes darting around, she scared the crap out of me. She just really made me nervous. And I thought, oh man, this girl could hurt you. And it's funny because later when I taught an entrepreneurism class, she came to one of the classes, and we were sitting talking afterwards. And she told me when she first met me, I scared the crap out of her. And I'm going, me? I can't imagine scaring anybody. The crybaby, I'm running around crying every time something goes wrong. And she was horrified. So people who aren't used to you walking around with some confidence are if they're not afraid of you or scared, they're intimidated. And that was a real hard thing for me, because I didn't realize I carried myself differently. So I didn't know how. And again, there was a group of, I'll call them the white women group, the clique, and they weren't nice at all. And they finally warm up and get nice to you. And they're almost apologize for not being nice to you at first. But they knew my story a little bit, and they'd heard about me, and they just left me out hanging and just thought, forget you. Nobody cares about you. And it was just, they're mean. Those were the mean girls.
I think a lot of people, if you're in that situation, are going to front up maybe a certain side of their personality that it wouldn't normally reflect or show to others, because they are intimidated and they don't know how to behave, unless you're probably someone that's been back and forth there a few times. And I would say that the majority that have ended up in prison haven't had a strong female role model that's successful, or has been able to show them perhaps that there is a different way in life and you can behave differently, and you can be as successful in your mind as maybe some of these people are used to being with their bodies, especially for those that are trying to come up with ways to generate income for drugs and all these sorts of different things.
And I drew a lot of them for advice. A lot of them would come to me for advice about a letter they'd got from an attorney, or a home situation, or what should they do about a child that the care provider wasn't bringing them in for visitation or even letting them talk to them. And we'd talk about what things were. Just if they're having a bad day, they might come see me, and I'd try to boost them up and stuff. It was pretty common for me to have visitors. I mean, to me, that's one of the things that I got to do that I thought, was it's just one of the things I got to do while I was in prison that I felt like was a giving back situation and made my life easier. I mean, I made friends, and I just said, I cried when I left prison because I worried about the girls. I said, who cries when they leave prison? I do, because I just, I worried about who's going to take care of them and who's going to answer their problems. And there's just not very many people that are helpful there. And I would help everybody once. And then once I figured out your story, if you were a moocher or just, a little off, or, I could stay busy enough that I could clear myself away.
Do you think, though, the Big Sisters program helped with that? Because if you don't have anything really to start with, and you're dirt poor and you're coming in, certainly programs like that are going to be so beneficial in a prison system to help other inmates. And it's inmates helping other inmates. Is that correct?
It is. But then you've got the inmates who go, that's not how we do it here. So we had one gal on there, and she was supposed to be like the queen of the church goers and just the most holier than thou. And every night at 8:00 p.m., you could see her kneeling on the concrete praying, and blah, blah, blah. But then when I was running Big Sisters, a lot of girls who were going to another prison or camp were giving me their things that they couldn't take with them. And I was building up sizes and inventory for things. And this girl went and told on me and had them all taken away out of Big Sisters, because that's not how they do it there. Well, everybody doesn't get taken care of. So you needed to have it. And then even sometimes when you gave stuff to people, again, I could explain I'm with Big Sisters, I'm here to help. But it's like the government saying, I'm from the government, I'm here to help, or the IRS, I'm here to help. It's like, no. So they didn't trust you. I mean, people didn't trust you right away. Again, the confidence I got over time were the girls that were there trusted me to tell the girls who might be asking for something, I was trustworthy, and I could be trusted not to confiscate the goods or sell them to my buddies or suddenly see those clothes on myself, that I would use them for what they're for. And again, I was pretty devastated when I lost the clothes that I'd built up, because I had enough that I could have 10 women come in different sizes and shoes, and I could literally have them completely set up in a bag. I'm not talking a lot of stuff here, but maybe a pair of sweatpants, maybe a pair of tennis shoes, a toothbrush, some shower gel, some shampoo, a comb or a brush, maybe, just the most basic things that you don't get. And again, it doesn't earn their trust particularly, but by being able to tell them I was big sisters, they would at least take it from me.
That also brings to light maybe a bit of a power imbalance. So, I mean, you've already got a power imbalance with the guards and you're in prison, we know that. But then you have a power imbalance with the women. Did you find that that was a real issue in the day to day, the different dynamics of the different groups and the cliques?
There were clearly people who had more power. The woman who ran the kitchen, the chef, had huge power. The gal that I'm talking about who prayed every night ran one of the versions of the churches that went there and their programs, and literally set up with the meetings and what they were going to have. And she wielded a lot of power. I guess you could say I probably wielded power because I was a town driver. And I think it scared them. I mean, I know it scared them to death. I might be taking somebody out in the car for the first time in 7 years. And they were already just like this, shaking. They're so afraid to go outside because they just don't know anything about what to expect. They know there's phones and all sorts of systems out there that they don't know how to use or what to do with. And then you're taking them to this giant hospital with all this automation, and often they're just dumped at the door to go, find their way through. And so again, I think it was a relief to them when I'd say, look, this is your day. What kind of music do you want to listen to? I'm going to take you. I'll go with you. But I don't think that was normal.
No matter which way you look, there is a power imbalance in every aspect of prison life. You've said to me before that when you went into prison, you were trying to find all the information on how to navigate. And then perhaps one of the things that scared you the most was how to get out.
You could find loose information from people that you talked to on the phone, other people who'd been in prison, TV shows, talking to your attorney, very loose information about what to expect. And it didn't make sense because there's so many parts to it. It didn't make sense, but you could hear information. What nobody ever, ever, ever talked about was how to get out of the place. And I told my husband as he was driving me to go in, I said, I think the thing that scares me the most is how will I get out of here? I mean, it's so easy to get in, and it just didn't feel like you were going to get out.
Would you say that was the thing that made you feel the most unsafe?
That definitely made me feel the most unsafe, because again, you could lose good time and not go in. As an older person, I could have been put on medical hold. I mean, what if suddenly I got sick, or my blood pressure shot up, or I broke out with more type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetes, or whatever might happen. What if I got pneumonia or fell down and hurt myself? All of those things constantly were a concern for me as an older person. Even though I was pretty healthy, I was still worried about it. It just seemed like they could have any excuse to say you're not going. It scared me to death.
Thank you for listening to How to Go to Camp with Katrina McLaren and Cheryl Womack. For more support, check out the Women of Worth website, www.womenofworth.wow.org, where you'll find helpful resources, including Cheryl's books, Mummy Loves You Everywhere and How to Go to Camp, Surviving in a Women's Federal Prison. Whether you're preparing for the journey or supporting someone through it, remember, there's guidance, hope and a community ready to help you navigate this path.